Is this thing on?
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Summits Podcast. We appreciate you guys joining us today. We are rolling in July. It's hot here in Indy, as you guys can attest. Humidity is a nice, 90-ish% on top of 90 degrees Fahrenheit.
Walking through
Makes
water.
awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we actually played in a golf outing
yesterday?
not too long ago, and yeah, it was brutal.
Yeah,
which sounds pathetic to say, but it was.
Yeah, it's gonna be like that for a little bit.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
Well, we appreciate you guys listening to wherever you get your podcasts. For those of you joining us on the Heroes Foundation YouTube channel, thank you. And if you haven't, please hit that subscribe button and the little notification bell so you guys can be alerted when new episodes like this one drop. Speaking of new episodes, today we are joined by Stacy and Chris DesJean. Welcome, guys, to the Summits Podcast.
Thank you.
Why don't you, I guess we always do, start off with a little introduction. You guys can share with the audience where you guys are from and a little bit about your background.
I'm Stacy, and this is my husband, Chris DesJean, and we live here on the southeast side of Indianapolis. I'm originally from Churubusco, Indiana, which is northern Indiana.
The fort, near the fort.
That's right. Okay. And Chris grew up here in the township as well, went to Franklin Central High School. Yep. We met at UIndy. I ran cross country and track, and he played basketball.
Where did you, so Chris went to, who's a Flash.
Mm-hmm.
You ran track and cross country in high school. What high school?
Churubusco High School. We were the
High
Eagles.
School. Okay, gotcha. All right. Yeah. And then on to Greyhound fandom.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah.
Nice.
Go Hounds.
My cousin's actually he's going there to play soccer.
Oh, great.
Yep.
They have a good
great
soccer
graduated.
program.
They do.
Yeah. So.
Chris, what position in basketball?
Played the 3 small forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say, based on your height, I was not going to guess point guard.
No.
Although that would be impressive if it was.
No. It's funny, in high school, I'm the biggest guy on the floor most of the time, so I'm playing center or power forward, and then you get to college, and not really that tall for college. So, so a lot more out on the floor, and guys under the basket were too big for me, so I had to move out. So
a few guys on the IU roster who we had conversations about, who were probably playing center in high school, and now they literally are the same size as guards and have to figure out how not to play with their back to the basket. But that's another conversation.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Well, cool. Welcome. What you said you were a nurse, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And what,
yes.
Where do you practice at, and what specialty?
So I'm currently with community gastroenterology.
Okay.
And I think you'd mentioned you were at Riley before that.
Yeah, so I started out at Riley for a couple years when I was first out of nursing school, and then we moved up to northern Indiana with Chris's job.
Okay.
And then I went into the adult world of pre-post PACU, and then I got into GI when we moved again.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And then commercial banker,
Yep.
right?
Been with Wells Fargo for 21 years pretty much since I graduated from college. So started here in Indy, and then as Stacy mentioned, we moved up to Fort Wayne, and then lived in a couple of the surrounding communities with various promotions, and then moved us up to South Bend, and so we were in South Bend for about 4 years with the bank, and then moved back here about 8 years ago. So it's been a great company, and I've enjoyed my time.
Awesome. Yeah, it seems like there's quite a few people in the Wells Fargo family in the Indianapolis area. It seems like a pretty sizable office around here.
Yeah, it's not too bad. Comparatively speaking, we're more prevalent out west and down south with the Wachovia acquisition, but there's still a decent number of us here in Indianapolis carrying the flag.
Cool.
So,
Nice.
Well, as you guys know, July is Sarcoma and Bone Cancer Awareness Month. So, guys, what is your cancer story?
So it was October 8th of 2020, and we have 3 children. We have a 16-year-old, a 13-year-old, and then William, who's 9. And at the time, we had just started our fall break. We were staying at home, and he had been complaining of some leg pain off and on, just thought he was growing. He's growing at a rapid rate like all boys do. And he was at swim practice that evening, and we got a call from the coach. Chris and I had been walking outside while he was swimming, and he said that he couldn't bear any weight on his leg, and so we went in to get him, and I knew something was wrong. He had jumped, he said, and he felt like a pop, and he wouldn't even put his toes on the ground. So thinking back to my Riley days and kids, and I knew that he didn't fall necessarily and break anything, so I was very concerned. So we got home and we got all cleaned up, and I took him to Riley that Thursday evening on October 8th. It was right in the height of COVID, so I was alone with him at the time. We waited in the ER for quite a while because it was full. And I was really getting ready to leave. I kind of had it. I was like, maybe we'll just come back in the morning again. And he's like, no, Mom, we're almost there. We got to stay. And so we were kind of tucked away in a corner. I was trying to keep him protected because I was holding him because he couldn't walk. And so we finally got called back, and they took him back to x-rays right away. And the physician assistant that was evaluating us knew that I had a medical background, and she's like, you know why you're here, right? And I said, yeah, I know what we're looking for. They took him back, and they did the x-rays. And about 2 hours later, they came back and just said that he did break his femur, his left femur. But the reason why it broke was they believed there was a tumor there. And so that was the middle of the night. They said, we're going to admit you because we need to get an MRI first thing this morning and get a better view of what's going on. And so we got upstairs to our room. Again, I'm still alone with just he and I. He doesn't know what's going on. He had finally fallen asleep. They were able to get him comfortable with some pain medicine. And he had his MRI done. He had to be sedated for that. They put him to sleep just because he wasn't going to be able to lay still and keep his legs still. So we did that. And I knew he came back to the room pretty quickly after his MRI, and I had fallen asleep, and I awoke to a team of doctors standing over me. And it had only been a couple hours since the MRI, and so I knew what he was about to deliver. And the doctor that gave us the news that your son has cancer he was wonderful. He stopped and he said, I know that you're here by yourself. Does Will have a dad or your husband? And I was like, yeah, he does. And so he hit pause in our conversation, and we got Chris on the speaker on our phone, and he went through everything again. And just from there, it was kind of a whirlwind. It was a Friday afternoon by now. So we're getting ready for the weekend, and of course, nothing's going to happen on the weekend. But we did meet with our oncologist, Dr. Bear, that late afternoon, early evening. She came in to kind of review a game plan of what it was going to look like for us going forward. And we ultimately took him home that Friday night. They splinted his leg, and they're like, nothing's going to be done over the weekend. There's no reason for you to be here.
Was
Go home.
the basis of the conversation at this point still just based off the scan, or did they also do some blood draws? And
just the scan is
the
all
scan,
we
okay.
knew was there was a tumor in his femur. That's all we knew at that time. So we went home and had a weekend with family. Our daughter had sectional race for cross country. She runs for the high school. And at this time, we hadn't shared the information with anyone. Will didn't know either that he had cancer. We waited until that Saturday evening, and we told them all together, and that was really awful.
Yeah.
And then that Monday, we started getting phone calls, and everything just started going really fast. He had a biopsy that week, I think on Tuesday or Wednesday of that week. So we knew right away that it was cancer because they did the initial reading in the OR room. And so we knew it was malignant. We just didn't know what kind at that point. And at that point as well, he was put in a full leg cast. So now we have an 8-year-old that can't walk. He's in a leg cast from hip to ankle, and we were just given the diagnosis of bone cancer.
Yeah.
So a lot to take in. But the pathology, unfortunately, took almost 2 weeks to get back to determine exactly what type of bone cancer, because every type of bone cancer has different treatment plan, and we couldn't start until we knew what kind. There's Ewing sarcoma, there's undifferentiated sarcoma, and then osteosarcoma. And so about like day 12 or 13, our oncologist said, we can't wait any longer. We have to get treatment started. And in the meantime, he had also had a PET scan, which the PET scan was clean, so that was such a blessing that it hadn't spread anywhere.
Yeah.
He did have a chest CT that showed, because before they put him to sleep, he had to have the chest CT to make sure his lungs were okay. It did show a couple spots in there, but very, very small. And they said that we weren't going to worry about those at that time. It could potentially be a rabbit hole that we were going down that we just didn't need to. It was nothing alarming. We'd watch them. Mm-hmm. And so then, like I said, about 2 weeks later, he had his port placed, and we also did a bone marrow biopsy. Since we didn't know what type for Ewing's, we would need to know if his bone marrow was involved. For the other 2 types of cancer, we didn't necessarily have to have that information, but we still didn't have the pathology back. So we all, rather than going through yet another procedure, just do it all at once.
Yeah.
How did he handle the bone marrow biopsy?
He was asleep.
Okay.
Lucky.
Yeah, he was asleep. So they did the port and the bone marrow all at
Yeah.
once.
Okay.
That's
He-
one of my experiences that I remember vividly, and I was not asleep, though I kind of wish I was. I didn't particularly enjoy that part.
glad
and
he was
I may or
asleep.
may not have said a few choice words that echo down the wall or
Yeah.
hallway. But
Yeah.
Yeah, he was sore afterwards, but he didn't really complain too
Yeah.
much about it. I mean, it was maybe a day or 2 of some soreness.
Like
and
his
then
hips
that
were
was it.
sore,
Yeah.
but yeah, he did wonderful.
yeah. Just that notion that he's asleep versus knowing that there's someone there like with a giant corkscrew in your hip.
Yeah.
That's the part that I can't seem to lose out of my memory.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
luckily for
Yeah.
a lot of his procedures, he was asleep, and he
Yeah.
was 8, and he doesn't remember a lot of it, so
Yeah.
it was a blessing.
Yeah.
all of it. So he had his port and bone marrow, and we got him up to his room and got settled. And at that time, Dr. Bear had decided we would just start the treatment plan for the undifferentiated sarcoma.
Okay.
And we
And is
met.
that still pre-formal path report?
Right.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
she's like, we got to get started. We can't let this
Yeah.
continue
Can't
to
go any
grow.
longer.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we decided that's a good plan, and we talked at length while he was still waking up. And I got back to my room, and maybe an hour later, she called on my cell phone and said, we got a final path. A Miami pathologist determined that it was osteosarcoma. So we halted doing chemo that night, and we waited until the following day. She's like, I'll be in the morning, and we'll go over our new care plan. And so we slept. It was wonderful knowing that we finally knew the path that we were going to take.
Yeah.
Because
There's
for
a lot of-
2.5 weeks, we were in limbo.
A lot of stress around what's the
what
plan,
ifs.
what it's going to look
Yeah.
like, what's the timing, and this and that and the other thing. So it was tough. You knew something was wrong. You just wanted to plan, and you wanted to get started on
Right.
whatever
The plan.
the plan.
plan,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so with bone cancer, the only treatment is ultimately you have to remove the bone that's affected. So, and it's very specific, it's very time sensitive on when that surgery happens.
Okay.
So on week 12 is when he ultimately had his leg resection. Up until then, we had 4 or 5 rounds of chemo. He started on Halloween weekend back in 2020.
Yeah, so what is the protocol? I mean, obviously, you said that they want to remove the section of the bone, but do they always start with chemo first? Or
Yeah.
okay.
So in all the plans, they all started with chemo, but it was a different combination of chemos.
Okay.
In different length of time that you
Yeah.
would do the chemo before you would have
Right.
action on the bone.
Okay.
So yeah, so his first couple rounds were quite awful. It was the really hard hitters, and he was very sick.
Yeah.
He, of course, lost his hair, and that was really hard. That was a really hard night for all of us because he was growing his hair out. And
Me too.
yeah. But so October we started. So November, December, he had chemo every week to 2 weeks. We were inpatient for all of them. We'd go in for count checks on Thursdays. We'd get admitted. We'd stay over the weekend, and then depending on what chemo, determined how long he was there for.
Right.
The first couple were only like 3 days, but they made him very, very sick once he got home.
Yeah.
Then
And he was inpatient those 3 days?
yeah.
Yeah.
So again, only one caregiver can be at the bedside because it's COVID,
Yeah.
and you can't change out.
Yeah. That's
It's
Or you could, but it had to be like 24 hours. There was a lot of
Oh,
stipulations. So that was It was very challenging because we still had 2 daughters at home that
Yeah.
needed cared for.
It was challenging too once he did come home. He starts to, their counts are pretty low when they come home, but well enough to leave, and then this constant worry of trying to keep him isolated and keep him healthy, because obviously, you get to during a pandemic, becoming neutropenic, it's an added level of risk and concern. So it was extremely difficult because kids at that time were still going to school.
Yeah, because this was the start of that year. So
they were still going at that time.
Yeah, it was kind of a modified school schedule. Our oldest was only going like 2 days a week. Our middle schooler was going full time, and he had been going full time, but then luckily we were able to get him virtual.
Okay.
So it all worked out well in that regards for schooling. He did really well with chemos, all in all, things considered. I mean, he got really sick in December right before Christmas. Okay. He was very, very low on counts, and they warned us that this was going to be a really hard round for him to rebound. But it was super important that we tried to get as many chemos in as we could without delay, so we could have surgery on January 13th, ultimately, was when he had surgery.
Okay.
Because the more dead cells that you have in the bone, the higher success and the better prognosis, basically.
Okay. Interesting.
So we wanted to have like 75% or greater dead cells in that tumor when they ultimately operated on him. So he needed to get as much chemo as he could to really attack the cancer.
Yeah. So this may be a dumb question, but what does that surgery look like?
So we had 3 options.
Yeah, 3 options really for him based on where it was. It was amputation was an option. The other option was kind of a hybrid of
called a rotation plasty.
Yeah, called a rotation plasty, where they kind of take your
knee becomes your hip.
Your knee becomes your hip, and
but you rotate it.
Rotate it around, and so then it then would fit into a
so your prosthetic piece would fit into your ankle and foot, which has now become your knee.
Yeah.
The fact that they can even do
right,
that.
it's pretty incredible.
It's I mean, we saw some people that had that done in the hospital, and it was following after he had his, and I was like, it's definitely different and unique, and the fact that they even came up with that is incredible. And then the third option for him was it's called a resection, where they basically remove that portion of the bone and then use a cadaver bone and some bolts and screws and all kinds of stuff. And our orthopedic oncologist, Dr. Collier, felt like that was the best option for him since he was so young. It was still risky with how high up he thought he would have to go in the hip. And the good news was, with both the knee and the hip, it was not anywhere near the growth plates. So he felt like there was a good opportunity for clean margins. So ultimately, he made the recommendation to, hey, let's do the resection and use the cadaver. He found one that, size-wise was a perfect fit for him.
No, but I mean, I'm obviously not a doctor, but I would think forward-looking, especially for an 8-year-old. I mean, yes, we're trying to deal with the issue at hand, but trying to think possibly also down the road. Yeah. That would probably be the most ideal option.
We wanted to at least try it. If it didn't work, then we would do amputation. But once you do amputation, there's no going back.
Right.
And it was going to be a really hard fit for a prosthetic piece to fit in his hip because of how high his resection was going to have to go. So that was our other determining factor of, let's try it. Let's give him the best chance of saving his leg and for him to have as normal of a life as possible.
Right.
And I think the other part of it was, for like you or I as grown adults, they would not attempt something like that. It's not really an option. They felt, he was young.
Yep.
The healing powers of the young are significantly better than adults, and so
not that we're old.
Not that there's anybody old.
You told me the other day I was a 12-year-old.
But so ultimately they felt like that was the best recommendation, and we talked about it a lot and said, let's give it a try. And so they found a pretty good match for him as far as the bone and his leg. And, since the growth plates weren't really impacted, he felt really good chance that the leg would continue to grow normally. And, so that was what we elected to do.
My aunt on my mom's side, she was 12, similar kind of situation. At the time, it was a few years ago. I don't know what the the procedures were at place, but she ended up having to have amputation. So she hasn't ever had a prosthetic because of like how high up it was and things like that. But I just always remember growing up, like she's been a wizard on crutches and stuff like that. She's done, Paralympics for skiing and all this other stuff and things like that. So
that's great.
It's amazing from that perspective then to see like that there are multiple options. So that's really amazing.
Yeah. And that was a really hard decision that we really struggled with. Not obviously the cancer diagnosis, but then making the best decision for him that's going to affect the rest of his life ultimately. Yeah. And but like we said, Dr. Collier felt very confident and comfortable with that decision. And it was a success. He had surgery. They removed 27 centimeters, so not quite a foot of his femur. Wow. Yeah. It was a lot more than what we had envisioned would be removed, I guess. Yeah.
As a
I don't know if I ever asked.
Yeah.
I mean, oh gosh.
I don't know what it was, but it was. I mean, I've certainly got pictures that I can
he
share.
Just very little on both ends, basically.
Okay. Yeah. But enough that they felt he felt confident that it would be success, and ultimately it was, and obviously fast forwarding, it has been. So, but 9-hour procedure for him, and he was very, very happy with when it turned out, and I think he was immobile in that leg.
He started walking back in September, so
almost a year.
Yeah, he was non-weight bearing for almost a year. Yeah.
Wow. Now, did COVID plus doing needing a donor cadaver bone and things like that accelerate or prolong how long it took to go from chemo treatment to surgery at that point? Was it
it was very
or anything like that?
It was pretty regimented.
It was speeded to the drum of their plan without. I mean, we had no setbacks leading up to surgery, which was great. Yeah. He was sick in December, but we were able to make it out in time for Christmas to get home, which was amazing. And then he had yet another round after that of chemo before surgery.
Just all on track.
We really did. We stayed right on track, which was such a blessing. And that we were able to keep him healthy in order to do that. That was a really hard task at times. But we did it. So that was our goal, was we had to get to January to do surgery to get rid of the tumor.
Yep. And I can't recall, it was probably a recovery of maybe 6 weeks before they started chemo back up again?
I went back and read our notes. It was only 3 weeks. He was off for 3 weeks, and then we had to get back to the chemo schedule right away. So, because we got cleared, he saw him on a 2-week checkup, and then we started chemo that following week. So there's no rest for the weary. You just keep marching. And he had to have 18 rounds of chemo.
Post-surgery were 18 more rounds?
18 total. I think we did 5 before surgery, 5 or 6. So then the bulk of it was after.
Right. And over about what time period did that last?
He finished his last chemo in June, mid-June, or the beginning of June, I guess, of 2021.
2021. Okay.
Yeah. So we started in October, and he finished in June. And he really, again, from post-surgery to the end of his treatment in June, he did wonderful. I think we had to delay 1 chemo round at the very end just because his counts were just in the tank. His body was just so over the fight.
Yeah.
And I think, too, from the surgery perspective, they were able to get clean margins for him on his leg, and then the bone showed significant reaction to the chemotherapy.
I think 75%. We had exactly what we needed.
Right at the benchmark for, showing that it was reacting and being killed by the chemo. So it was a blessing as well that what we were doing was working.
Yeah.
Because that also would determine, if he didn't have that 75%, he was going to have more chemo.
Okay.
But we didn't, thank God. So that was great.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, here we are, June 2022.
Yeah.
What's the last 12 months been like?
Okay. Last 12 months has been, so he was, given the disease free after his last round of chemo in July. And, it was interesting because we had that last scan, and there was still that spot in the lung that, that they still felt pretty good about it. I think the last report
hadn't changed
and so I think they called it a a lymph node or something like that, and said, "Hey,
who knows?
we're disease free." So then we go back in September to get
more scans.
Yeah, get his scans, his 3-month follow up, because
Right.
we're on a 3-month cycle now with leg and chest CT, and we're like, well, that spot has grown, and we need to do something about it. So
Went from like 2 millimeters to 5.
So
Okay.
so at this point they were, not, doesn't need chemo. It's right here on the end of his lung, so we can actually go in and take it out.
Yeah.
So they scheduled him for surgery.
The end of September,
Yeah.
he had a wedge resection. And it's pretty crazy. What they do is they'll remove that tumor, but then they also literally felt inside his lung with their hands for any additional tumors. Because if there were more tumors that the scan didn't pick up, then he would have to have chemo. But if it was just the one and we got clear margins, take it
I was
out,
just going to
move
ask
on.
you how they do that surgery, but you
Yeah.
just answered that. Okay.
Yep. So by the grace of God, it was just the one, thank goodness. And so we had the wedge resection. We stayed for, 4 or 5 days. He had a chest tube, and he did fine.
It's right before fall break, so we had 2 weeks.
So then he
off of
recovered
school.
at home for
Right.
2 weeks. It was perfect. He went
Yeah.
back to school. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and backing up, we did start school once he was.
In August. he
In
started.
August he started back up. He was in a wheelchair and using a walker. He could still get up, but he still had his cast on.
Yeah.
So started
'Cause
school.
he fell and broke his leg
Well,
again
we
in
want to tell
July
that
of
story.
last year, or June.
Let's tell that story.
Not his allograft, but his
Yeah,
tibia.
just,
so.
Okay.
Little mishap.
Just
he
the
fell.
longest story made short. So he was.
He's a boy. Come on.
Right?
so
I know.
we were going to my in-laws in Cherubusco. He was super excited because we'd barely left the house and done anything, and so he was coming in with his. He was on crutches at the time, and so my father-in-law had just put down this brand new epoxy sealant on his in his garage.
Nice and
The
slick.
garage was nice and slick.
It had rained apparently,
It
or
rained,
he washed it out. I
and,
don't know.
So crutches go this way, and
Well, fell.
down he goes. So.
Awesome.
So we had to
So we're
put the
back in
cast
the
back
lake
on.
house.
We put the cast
For
back
6
on,
weeks, yeah.
and so he started school, and then we had the wedge resection. Everything looked good at the scan. Then in October, and he got the cast off, and he started physical therapy on his leg.
Started to learn to walk again.
Yeah, started to learn to walk again using his walker and all that. And so he's slowly but surely, with hours of physical therapy, had learned to do that again. And then when was his next scan then?
So we had one in December, and it was clean, so that was incredible.
Right.
Yeah.
Everything's looking good, and his legs started to grow, which was amazing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it grew. I think by the beginning of the year, he had grown like half of an inch already.
Yeah.
So that was great, because that was kind of a mystery too of would his legs start to grow again.
Yeah.
You know, it was. But again, great. His legs growing. He's a nice, good boy, ornery.
Yeah.
And then in March, we had scans again, our planned scans, and a new spot was found in his lung. But they couldn't determine. It looked kind of different. They said it appeared to be fluffy instead of kind of solid looking. Okay. But it was still small, and so they're like, we'll just rescan again in 3 months. And they said it could be metastatic disease again, or it could just be remnants from like a respiratory infection, which we all had the creepy crud over the winter,
I had COVID. My daughter had COVID. So it had all been within the last, 6 weeks that we had all had that. And, kind of the way they worded it with us was, hey, if that would have been like you or I, they wouldn't have thought anything of it. But since he had a history of where there was something there, and with the challenge with osteo, especially since it likes to go to the lungs, our oncologist had told us multiple times that, hey, we can end up going down some rabbit holes here. So the best course is to let's, see what it does. It's pretty small. We can't do anything about it right now, and just rescan in June, and which we did, and the spot was gone. So,
awesome. Great.
So yeah.
So we're still disease free.
Yeah. Wow.
Yep.
And he actually started swimming again a couple months ago. He got back in the pool for the first time.
Nice.
So one of the restrictions that he has with his leg is he is very limited to his activity. He can walk, ride a bike, and swim.
Okay.
So no more really.
I would think swimming. I mean,
activities.
again, I'm not a swimming expert, but it's a little bit certainly less
Right.
impact. So
Yeah.
Absolutely.
it'd be a good thing.
Yeah. So he has some limitations with that, restrictions, but he got in the water and just took off, and so it was wonderful to see
So
him
did he get your
normal
feet? So a
again.
little Michael Phelps.
Yeah, he's got
flipper.
some good feet.
He
yeah,
does.
so-
He's got some big feet.
Yeah, so he's obviously through therapy. He's got upright and was walking on his own without crutches, a walker, or anything. I want to say that was probably.
It was really quick.
Yeah, it was pretty quick. It was,
He got rid of all that stuff real fast.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
like probably
So-
November.
Okay.
He was walking.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and,
probably walking unassisted.
Unassisted then. And
Just
so,
get me out of all
Right.
those things.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And
Yeah.
so,
Just wanna be normal.
yeah, and he wants to do some golf lessons too. So we'll
Nice.
get him going because that'll be a
talking
nice,
about that.
Yeah.
safe sport as
Yep.
well
Yeah.
for him. But
Yep.
he's been super happy with swimming. He loves to fish, and so those will probably be our activities. But right now he's
That's
been
okay.
kind of since the last round of chemo in June of last year. We had the wedge removed, which again we feel like we probably never mitigated it the first time because it was always there. But he's been in great spirits. The leg looks good. All the follow-up orthopedic appointments have been really good. He's had again growth. His growth plate's fired back up. There was a little bit of concern because they had to put a screw through the growth plate in the knee when they first were trying to stabilize the leg, and then that was removed. And so I think the orthopedic doc was concerned that it wouldn't fire right back up, but it has,
did.
and so
Awesome.
he's growing.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
growing pretty
Kids are
good.
so resilient. It's
I was gonna say,
amazing.
how is he? Mentally, I mean, is he?
We have ups
Good,
and
and-
downs.
yeah.
I mean, he doesn't talk about having cancer. Definitely not something he brings up. I think it's been a little frustrating that he can't do everything that he used to. He used to
Yeah.
jump out of trees, and he was just a wild Indian at times, and he can't run. He kind of has this modified skip that he does, but he gets around. It's for now it's okay.
Right.
His friends have been wonderful to him,
Yeah.
which has been such a blessing.
He had a great teacher, and the kids all were very
Really rallied
accommodating
around
to
him.
him. And recess was, they would modify whatever they were doing so he could participate. And
Yeah.
so it's been really good. And even from the beginning, he's always certainly handled it better than
Way
any
better
of
than
us
us.
have. And he always was. The main thing he said to me was just, don't cry and always be honest with me and just tell me what's going on.
Yeah.
And,
Fair
pretty
enough.
pretty mature for an 8-year-old.
for
Yeah.
sure. Just thinking the same thing.
Right.
How old is he?
Yeah.
So, and
That
even
was
now, we-
from the very beginning, he's like, just tell me the truth and don't cry anymore.
Yeah, we
Which
talk
is
about
really
it.
hard to do, but
Yeah.
Talk about worrying and scans, and he's like, not with any cell in my brain do I worry about it or worry about
Yeah.
it coming back. And it's just,
Yeah.
again, better than
better than us.
mom and dad.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
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 Very cool.
Yeah.
I just had a thought, and it just totally escaped as fast as it came in.
Just in one side, out the other, real quick.
Pretty much,
Yeah,
yeah.
I hate it when that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll come back like as soon as we end, probably.
Yeah.
That's how it usually goes.
That's right.
What I was gonna say was, it's really kind of cool to see kids rally around one another. There's certain, we all experienced this when we were growing up. There are certain stages of childhood where kids can start to get a little nasty or whatever. But you have a situation like this, and I'm not saying that stuff all goes out the window, but when they all rally around one, it's very cool to see.
It was amazing.
We've seen
It
that
was.
in with my kids, and it's cool to hear about
Yeah.
it here.
Yeah. The school, we were new to the school that we were at when he was diagnosed because we had gotten redistricted, and so we had only been there like 9 weeks. We didn't know anybody, but the school was pretty amazing at all the different things they did for him, and they all wore yellow one day for him, and we took him in there, and they made like a parade. We went through the halls for him, and
Nice.
it was wonderful what they did. It was so
Yeah.
nice to know that he was loved and
Which
thought
school is
of.
that?
Adams Elementary.
Adams Elementary.
Yeah.
Shout out to Miss Volley and Mrs. French for
Yeah,
Yeah.
they were. Yeah, his
Fantastic.
teachers and our principal have just been wonderful. Because
Yeah.
I mean, when he started school, he's in a wheelchair, non-weight bearing. Then he went to crutches. Then his cast was off. Then he had a walker. There's just so many stages,
Yeah.
and we've just been able to roll with it. And he's been safe the whole time at school because he never left my side for a really long time, and
Yeah.
that was really hard to let him go that first day of school. And then he ended up riding the bus
Yeah.
the second half of the school year, so
Nice.
that was great.
Yeah.
He wanted to get back on that bus.
Yeah.
So
It's a lot of
He
those
did.
little things that people take for granted. He just was first milestone was just to get back into school, and then we were taking him every day, and he's like, I want to ride the bus. I want to ride the bus. And,
I'm like, well, it's not quite safe yet for you too, but eventually.
Once his leg got stronger and he could walk and get up the steps and ride the bus, then he was fine.
And his bus driver was so happy to have him back, and so that was really fun to see. Yeah.
Cool. So, what grade did Will just finish?
Just finished third.
Just finished third. Okay. And what are the plans for the summer besides swimming, obviously?
That's really it. Just swim.
We just got back from a vacation in Gulf Shores, and
Nice.
so
Cool.
so we
really
got
big vacation that we've done since he was sick, and just spend time with family. And they start back August 1st, so they'll be back in school in no time at all.
Yeah.
Looking for a summer camp for him for probably next year. He was his older sister goes to a summer camp, and so he's pretty bummed that he couldn't do that. I'm sure there's something out there that we can find, but he does a pretty good job of trying to keep himself safe. But as we talked about, the peer pressure of the kids getting involved, especially the ones who don't know him and don't know his history. Well, let's go do this, let's go do that, and maybe I can do that. So, but
well, maybe Michael Phelps has a swim camp.
that's right.
Right?
There you go.
I know.
There you go.
You got to look into that.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, we appreciate you guys coming in and sharing your story. It means a lot.
Thank you.
Will, congrats on being cancer-free. Keep fighting, man. And on that note, everyone at Adams Elementary, kudos to all you guys for rallying around Will and the DesJean family. It means a lot to have that support network. I mean, I can attest to that. They are certainly great examples and are appreciative of what you guys provided to them. And then I'd also want to give a quick shout out to Todd Kelsey, who is a classmate of one of my daughters at Bishop Chatard that just graduated. Todd's in his fight with a sarcoma right now. So Todd, we're all thinking about you. Todd's strong all the way. Good luck. And if there's anything we can do to help you out, we're happy to do so. And for all you guys listening out there or watching on YouTube, we appreciate you guys joining us today. Give a special blessing, if you will, to Will as well as to Todd in their fights. They would certainly appreciate it. We would appreciate it as well. Thanks again for listening and watching. And don't forget, beat cancer.